What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up, but is 100% real? I built a 13-foot tall T-Rex with Christopher Walken's head, and New York Magazine called it highbrow and brilliant. My dad's name is Luigi and my uncle's name is Mario. They are brothers. Eater, I forgot to add that my dad is also a plumber. I died first, and then was born. I've told this story a few times on Reddit, but I enjoy telling it, so here we go again. During the cesarean to bring me into the world, there was some major complication on my mother's end. She started bleeding internally, drowning me in the womb. When I was removed, the doctors tried to get me breathing but couldn't. I was declared dead. My mother was still unconscious, but my dad was brought in to say goodbye to me. He held me in his arms, was saying goodbye when out of nowhere I started coughing up blood and screaming as babies do. Apparently it was the weirdest moment in his life, being abjectly terrified and overwhelmed with joy that I was alive. It's my favorite story to tell, because weirdly it takes some pressures off on birthdays. I don't do well with too much attention by family/friends, but celebrating my death day doesn't bring people the same connotations. I grew up on the wrong side of the river, was considered by all to be the town loser, and went to work as a janitor while still in high school. Then, in my 40s I set a goal for myself, while still working full-time, to take one class at a time until I either graduate or die, whichever comes first. At age 49 I finished my Bachelor's of Science degree, at age 52 my MBA, and age 61 my PhD. Never let the arrogant elitists define who you are, or what you can be. My great-grandma ran a brothel back at the turn of the 20th century. She was Algonquin and people were pretty racist back then, so she had a hard time getting business. Since it was a coastal town, Maine, she bought up a couple leaky old row boats and would load them up with hookers and booze and row them out to the ships at night. When ships came in to port, most of the crew would get shore leave and hit the bars and brothels in town, but they always had to leave a few sailors on the ship to keep an eye on it. My great-grandmother figured those guys had money too and probably felt left out. She basically set up water-based lot lizards, or Uber hoes. My grandpa and his sisters grew up in the brothel and no one would talk to them or socialize with them. My grandpa met my grandma picking green beans for a local farmer. They fell in love. When they wanted to get married they had to leave the state to get away from her family that were utterly disgusted that she would marry the son of a whore. So they ran off to Detroit because GM was hiring, and that's how my family came to Michigan. I never graduated high school, but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled and my mom never went through the legal steps to actually get me a real diploma, so she made one in Photoshop that was then used to get me into this podunk community college that didn't verify it. From there I got my associate's degree, which I then used to get into a decent university, where I got my bachelor's. I'm allergic to lettuce. Like I carry an EpiPen allergic. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. I took my mother for a surprise trip to New York City. She got married to my father there in '68. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the type of thing you could do for the weekend, and therefore she packed a bag and brought her passport. We got to the airport and said, "Surprise, we are going to New York," and she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived, on our first morning, I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She said, "When I was last here, in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so I'd like to go to the top of them." "Your wish is my command," I said, and off we went to the WTC. That was the afternoon of September 10th, 2001. Suffice it to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 AM the next morning. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone leave. A kid ended up leaving, and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple minutes later, the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. Probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. Edit. Wow, I made this comment and didn't return to Reddit until just now. Was not expecting it to be that big of a hit. Thank you. I do not have photos of myself playing the game with him, but I believe my parents have a couple of photos of me with him and getting his autograph. I still have the signboard on my wall. I saw the former Prime Minister of Poland in his underwear. Once in college, I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head, but I kept calm outwardly and said no, but you can teach me. I worked in it for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. I found out my father wasn't my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and trays. I raised my hand thinking I was a smartass. Your chart isn't accurate. My dad has AB negative and I'm O positive. My teacher said I think your mom has some explaining to do. And we all chuckled. Turned out, he was not my father. My husband, I'm 30, has been my best friend since I was 7. He was the new kid at school and I walked up to him and said, "We are going to be best friends." He said, "No, we aren't. Leave me alone." I bugged him every day for 2 weeks before he finally said, "If I'll be your friend, will you shut up about it?" We were married 20 years later. Proved his ass wrong. A horse threw me in the air when I was a child, but I wasn't on his back. He grabbed the skin of my back with his teeth and yeeted me. My dad kidnapped me and took me to Singapore for very malicious purposes. I'm sure you could imagine. I was 15 and my dad literally had fake documents and suitcases filled with random clothes. When we got there, we went to a sketchy hotel, and after 15 minutes he went to the bar. A bit after that, some guy just walks in. I was confused, but he began muttering saying I was too pale and too old and he left. I called my dad, but he didn't answer, so I climbed out through the window and went to the police. They put me on a plane home that same hour. I don't really tell people because it's a bit of a crazy story and sounds made up, hence why it's here, but yeah. I was a rocket scientist. I worked on the 114 AGM. The science was verifying rocket bodies. The backbone of science is to repeat experiments. My job was to make sure we were gonna get the same result every time. People call me a liar all the time because the idea of rocket scientist is von Braun. I once won a $500 raffle during a routine visit to my local tea shop. It was the building's annual Black Friday event and there were 5 baskets with varying amounts of goods, services, and coupons. I needed tea, so my only stop was the tea shop. It cost me $20 to fill my tins, but they said raffle tickets were given out after a $25 purchase. I said fuck it and got a hot tea for me and the woman in line behind me. Entered with that one ticket. I got a call a few days later saying I won the top prize basket. When I went to claim, they asked about my purchases. I told them, and they said the drawings had over 1,000 tickets and many people had over a dozen entries. The raffle prize included $25 to the tea shop. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's door knobs. It turns out it's fake. Door knobs were invented after Napoleon died. I survived a plane crash in the desert, trapped there for 2 days, and was rescued by 2 dudes who were trying to bet if they can cook an egg in the sand. Spent a really cool day in London with Christian Slater and his mum. His mum is adorable. I got hernia by sneezing too hard. At age 50 odd, and with limited to no video game experience, my mother completed Mario 64 before I did, in about half the time it finally took me to do it. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time, and never got caught until Ancestry website happened lol. A pelican engulfed my head with its massive fucking beak when I was a small child. Pelicans are cunts. I can smell some illnesses and chronic symptoms. My sense of smell is normally pretty average, but I can sometimes smell if a person is sick before they start showing symptoms, and have been able to identify/predict 2 seizures, a diabetic blood sugar drop, and multiple chronic migraines before they happened.